Hi, I'm Kiri Kalata from House of Education. Today we're going to talk about virtual learning, homework, and all the lovely stuff that you're doing and dealing with right now. This particular series is going to be a multi-part series because we're going to break some of these things down. And the awesome thing is we're going into the holidays, so this means it gives you some downtime so that you can really focus on getting to the core of supporting your kiddos while they're in transitional learning of all different sorts. So in today's video, we're going to talk about patience, which is a really tough one right now, emotional management, and social modeling. These are three key components that are going to help you really hone in whatever is happening. If you're doing hybrid learning, you're doing mainstream in the classroom learning, or if you're just virtual 100%, or if you've decided to take control of your educational opportunity and truly homeschool. Now, truly homeschooling is different than schooling at home, which is what most virtual learning is. So, emotions and virtual learning, hybrid learning, in the classroom learning. Yes, emotions are important, and it doesn't matter what age your kids are. And I would say that, all ages are now struggling the most with emotions. And there's an answer for this. It's not because they're a more emotional generation. It's that there's so many emotions happening around them all over the place, from their teachers, from their parents, to themselves, to their friends. There's so many. It's massive, and it's really hard to manage when you haven't been taught and you don't have someone leading by example. So if you're having meltdowns, your teacher might be having meltdowns, and another student or three are having meltdowns in front of you, it's going to become pretty normal for you to have a meltdown. Now, is meltdown emotion? No, meltdown is not one emotion. A meltdown is the fact that we cannot identify the emotions that we've been dealing with. It is the state of overwhelm. So we need to let go of that overwhelm by leading by example and teaching what other options there are besides overwhelm. Overwhelm can be veered off, so that meltdown can be veered off if accurate communication is put in place. So first things first, it starts with the parents. Always. All behavior comes from home before it comes from anywhere else. Our children learn through what's happening at home, what we see at home, what we hear at home, and what we read at home. That's where all core behavior comes from. That's where all emotional management comes from. So when I say see and hear and read, we're talking about the books that they're reading. We're talking about the shows that they're seeing, or movies that they're seeing, or that they're watching you watch. We're talking about what they're overhearing in conversations. All of those are key components to how they manage their emotions. So we need to start first with leading by example. Now, this can be a tricky one. What if you don't know how to manage your emotions? And this is a big test right here. When you stub your toe in the morning, is it a bad 10 minutes, a bad hour, a bad day, the sign of a terrible week to come? That's going to give you a clue as to how well you manage your emotions. You have to be really honest with yourself here. Don't fake this, because this is what is going to help you the most. Be honest. If stubbing your toe on a Monday morning means that this week is going to be absolutely shit, then you need to go and find support. You need to figure out who's going to be best to help you learn about your emotions and how to manage them. Coaches, psychologists, read some books, listen to some podcasts on the EQ end of things, on the emotional end of things. Learn about emotional intelligence and start learning how to label your emotions, both past, present, and what's coming right now, what's bubbling up. Those are really important steps. Then, once you understand your emotions, you can lead by example. Of course, while you're learning, you can still lead by example. It's a great opportunity for you to open up dialogue and have conversations about emotions and how you feel them and what you do with them and what you think about them, because emotions are a thing you have. Emotions are almost like an object, and you can talk about them, and you can give them a color, you can give them a texture, you can give them a shape, and then they have a little bit more of a tangible ability to hone them in and to communicate with them and to communicate about them. So, overwhelm probably is maybe like a cube, and it's probably black, and it probably has a rough surface. And I bet you if you asked a kiddo, where does your meltdown that you had an hour ago, where was that meltdown inside your body? I bet you they can tell you exactly where it is. And it's probably in their core, not in their limbs. This is powerful stuff, and you can utilize this kind of dialogue to help your kiddos learn about labeling and identifying and then managing it. So take it step by step. First, talk about the emotions. Talk about how they feel. Do they feel hot? Do they feel cold? Do they feel spicy? Let them figure out their way of communicating, putting words to those feelings. Then, once they can say, I'm feeling really spicy, or I'm feeling really blah, like toast. This is a great one. A lot of people can recognize, I feel like burnt toast. It's pretty obvious. You feel really, really bad and not very edible. So you can go in and start talking about those types of feelings. And then once that communication and recognition is alive, then you can start talking about labels. Is this a feeling of sadness? Is this a feeling of frustration? And talk about the different levels inside frustration. Is this a frustration on a level 2 versus a level 9? Is this a frustration on a level 5? Okay, that's going to help you. Don't try to solve any problems yet. Just work on learning about those. What's your level of anger? What's your level of happiness? What's your level of bliss? What's your level of joy? Get into those after you've started identifying the feelings and how they feel in the body and what color or temperature they are. Then start rating them and giving them names and labeling them. Then, after you've done that, then start talking about the process of feeling that emotion, and not feeling bad about having that emotion, not feeling guilty about having that emotion, not feeling that that emotion is wrong or inaccurate, but that it's okay to feel that. And then talking about how to process it, how to step by step move your way outside of that sadness, outside of that frustration. What are the tools I can use to shift that? And this is where journaling and support from parents or teachers comes in. This is where playtime is useful, or music and dance. All of these are great tools to release you from emotions you don't want to tolerate, that you don't want to have existing inside your body. So again, this is critical time because we're seeing it now. These emotions were happening before, but only the teacher was seeing it. You might have saw some residue, but for the most part, these were being handled in the classroom or not handled at all. And this is why, again, the not handling it all, many parents don't know how to handle their emotions because it was handled in the classroom or just dusted under the carpet. So again, the process is learning about the emotions, creating some kind of identification system for them. What color is it? What shape is it? Where does it live in your body? Does it have a temperature? Like, is it hot? Is it cold? Is it medium? These are words any 5-year-old and up will definitely be able to identify with. Maybe a 4-year-old. You judge on this one, it's your kiddo, but 5 years old and up should be able to give it a shape, a color, and a temperature. Then you want to move into the next step, which is the labeling, understanding that there are words that denote these different feelings: frustration, anger, annoyance, happiness, joy, bliss. There's a great book series. I'll tag it here so you can see it. It's really cute, very simple, but it helps, again, build the vocabulary of emotions. So after you've learned the labeling, then it's about the processing of these labels, how to process these feelings, and the different ways to accept and release these feelings. So we're going to talk about social modeling. And social modeling is one of the things that makes learning in the classroom happen. Now, of course, in the education field, there are lots of theories on homeschooling works, public schooling works, private schooling works. Curriculum matters. Parents' involvement matters more. And social modeling is a huge component, and it happens in homeschooling, and it happens in public schooling, and of course it happens in private schooling. So what is social modeling? That is the element of being in an environment where other learners are learning at the same time. They are demonstrating a behavior that is going to enhance learning. So in the classroom, of course, you've got your class clown and you've got your little slow ones and you've got anything in between. But overall, you have some really good examples of sitting down and doing the work, the sitting down and the raising hands and asking questions. Social modeling happens. The teacher leads by example, by reminding students to raise their hands, by reminding students to ask questions, that there's no dumb question ever. And that's important. And that can happen in any environment. That can happen at home. That can happen in a true homeschool versus in a home at school at home environment, which is virtual schooling or hybrid schooling. Those environments can create social modeling. It just depends on what kind of setup you have created, what kind of environment you have created for your child. Now, you don't need to have the elaborate classroom setup. That happens, and you can see half of my room is kind of academically orientated, and the other half is totally personal and fun. But you don't have to have an academic setting to create an educational environment where social modeling happens. It is completely behavior orientated. So what do I mean by it's completely behavior orientated? The great thing on social modeling is anybody can demonstrate what they want their student or their child to do. It's leading by example. And this is probably the hardest one. We don't realize as parents, now that we're mostly at home with our kiddos, we don't realize the example we're displaying in front of them, especially when we think they're out of earshot, because that is the most critical example of social modeling ever. Because when the mice are away, the cats will play, or vice versa. I'm dyslexic. I don't remember which direction it goes, but it's the same thing. Kids know you're on your best behavior most of the time in front of them, but they know that the normal behavior, your normal adult parent behavior, is when they're in earshot and they're listening, they're paying attention to that, and that teaches them all about how to behave as a grown-up. So remember, the conversations you don't think they can hear, they hear. So if you're criticizing the educational environment that your child is in right now with your spouse or your friends, if you're criticizing your teacher, you're criticizing even yourself as being a poor teacher, you're laying a behavioral foundation for your child to question themselves, to question your ability to support them, to question their teacher's ability to support them. So you're laying that example, you're paving that path. So remember, watch your P's and Q's, because that matters so much. Now, what's another great example of social modeling for academic success? Well, if you're at home doing virtual learning, sitting next to your child and micromanaging their sessions, not a good way, because they're not learning any kind of independence. They're not learning to manage themselves. And that just sets up the precedent that you don't trust them, that they're not capable. You are creating an environment where they become dependent and needy for all of everything that you can do for them. And that will not stop outside of the classroom that's going to continue into other activities. So remember that when you're micromanaging their Google Classroom sessions or their Zoom sessions, you're going to be micromanaging many other things. And I have a feeling that many of you probably already know different situations where you are managing things you should not be managing at 5, 6, and 7-year-olds with 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. So think really carefully about what you were doing at 6 years old and what your kiddo is doing at 6 years old. There's a huge gap, and some of that has to do with helicopter parenting, micromanaging, whatever label you want to give it, your lack of trust in your child's abilities to be responsible. We're not looking for independence yet. Obviously, that's a tween thing, but we are looking to teach them how to respond, react, and move forward and continue to be proactive. So what do you do during a session like a Google session or the Google Classroom session or a Zoom session? Teach them. Hold their hand for the first couple of sessions and make it very clear what you're going to do and what you expect them to be responsible for doing. So you're going to teach them how to turn on their microphone, how to turn off their microphone, how to turn on their camera, how to get back to the Zoom screen when they accidentally click off. And you want to make sure that you've shut off all of your notifications. So your Facebook notifications, your text messages, and any other notifications that come through your computer are not there intruding on them. First, it makes a noise, so it alerts them. And if you are even a little bit in the know on things, you know that those noises actually are triggers that give adrenaline rush to anyone. So you're changing their chemistry, you're changing their ability to focus. There's a reason you have those notifications there. They are to make noise, to change your focus, but you don't want to do that to your kiddos. So make sure that you turn off those notifications because they're highly distracting for them, for the other students, and of course, even for your instructors. Okay, so next little point on social modeling. There are many different ways to social model. You can work on your computer and they can work on theirs side by side. And as long as you aren't cheating and going over to Instagram or Facebook or taking a phone call, you are modeling good work ethic behavior. What they do with school is a work ethic. What you do with your work is work ethic. So make sure that you're modeling what you would like them to see. If your work ethic lacks, you know where it comes from. This isn't rocket science. Your children don't behave in some abnormal way unless you have some kind of disability that you're dealing with. But even in the most part there, if you model behavior, an autistic child is going to be able to model that behavior with consistency. If you do it over and over and over again, they will be able to model the same thing. So you have to remember that you are setting the example. Now, there's some other things you can do. One of the things I do as a writer is we have write-ins. Now, of course, we used to be able to go out to a cafe and sit down and write together. There is nothing like sitting around with a bunch of other writers who are just sitting there typing away on their computer to make you go, oh, I'm not writing very fast. Wow, I need to get to work. Like, it's so motivating. So, put yourself and put your kiddo in that environment. There are, and you have to do some searching, but there are some homework clubs online where everyone is doing their homework, and that's what they're focused on. So you get to see other kids working on their homework. They're raising their hand because they have a question for the tutor who is managing the homework time sessions. So look into opportunities. You can even create this with your own kids' friends. So you can set up a time where your friends can all FaceTime together and do homework hour and have a designated parent every week rotate in, or every day rotate in, to answer the questions as best as possible. I know some of you are thinking, but I don't know the answers. That's okay. That's another session here. We will cover that later. Another thing you can do is, Even though you need to wear a mask, you can still go out to your local cafe or to your local Starbucks or whatever it is and take your laptops and go do your work and their school work together. The really interesting thing is that while the staff is working, it again triggers motivation to make you work. Of course, you get a little distracted by, whatever's going on, but sometimes those little distractions are still very helpful. And it's amazing what can happen when you just hunker in and are able to focus while you're out and about. Change of scenery helps. We're all stuck at home, or, maybe they're going to the classroom to home only. So getting that change of scenery really can be a powerful tool. As a homeschooling mom, this is something that I learned over time. And I used to give my son an allowance to go to the cafe so he could go have lunch and do one of his assignments while he was at the cafe. Now, mind you, this was earned. It wasn't instant. First, we had to have consistent work being done, but a nice change of pace. And again, modeling happened. First, I took him to the cafe and we both worked. And then I introduced that opportunity, and we had discussions about it, and we created expectations and boundaries, and it ended up being a beautiful thing. And we added more days of the week to make it consistent. And it really, you have to test and again have that communication there. Of course, the modeling matters. So talk to your kiddos about what they're seeing and what they need from you, and then check in with yourself and decide how well of a social model are you for work ethic. Patience. Patience is so hard, and it's even harder now. Patience stems from a lot of different skills. It stems with the emotional end of things. It stems from knowing what you need to know. Knowing what you need to know is really important, and it creates patience. Patience is also self-awareness and learning how far you can go or how little you can go. So a lot of people are using the words, let's give them grace, let's be calm, let's be peaceful, let's be zen. All different words for patience. But the most important thing is to go in with yourself, to communicate with yourself, not to communicate outside of yourself, because patience comes from within, not from without. So you have to remember that you need to take space and time to think, to create patience. So this goes for your children. If you can't be patient with them, you're not social modeling the behavior of patience. So you have to step back. Back in the 90s or so, this was a parent timeout, whatever you want to call it. But step back and gather your thoughts so that you can create that patience example, and then help your child learn to step back and create patience with themselves. Remember that breathing techniques are a wonderful tool, and there are millions of different ways to do them. You can see them all online. You can Google child breathing techniques and you'll get all kinds of options. Breathing like different creatures, doing yoga breathing, even doing yoga poses, which kind of forces the breathing to happening, to squeezing stuffed animals, which creates a breathing technique. They use this with adults who've had any kind of illnesses that impact their lungs. There are so many different things. I don't need to tell you. You need to find out what works for your kids. So look around for breathing techniques for your kiddos and work on that. A breathing technique for yourself as well. I mean, it's quite useful. An adult might need a pillow instead of a stuffed animal because a stuffed animal is a little bit small, but there's different things you can do that are going to help you clear your brain to create a path for patience. But you have to clear the brain and create a path for patience. Now, there's, besides the breathing techniques, of course, there's the counting to 10, counting to 20, reciting your ABCs. Those are all things you can do. And the reason they work is because they focus your brain on a specific thing that is not what you were frustrated with. So obviously, if you're working on ABCs with your kiddo and you're having a challenging time and you're losing your patience, don't do your ABCs because it's just going to continue to fester. Instead, do a breathing technique. But build your arsenal, your personal arsenal, with different tools that are going to help you create patience within yourself. Blowing balloons is another good one. Blowing bubbles, absolutely huge, many proven studies on that one for all ages. Uh, Reading a book for a minute, like seriously, set 60 seconds on your timer, open a book to any page and just read it, because it shifts your train of thought and empties that nonsense that was causing the impatience out of your head. If you have questions or specific situations, post them below. I would love to answer your questions.